Hi, in this video we are going to create and execute a Ansible playbook that will create a NSX Edge Services Gateway in our lab environment. And if you're following along with the Ansible course, in the last couple exercises we created first a couple logical switches, 4 different logical switches, each represents different IP subnets. And then in the next one, we created a distributed logical router that will provide the first hop east-west routing services for your virtual machines that are positioned on those logical switches. And it's not a requirement, but typically in NSX deployments, you have the distributed logical router providing first hop routing services and deploy an edge services gateway that provides the north-south gateway, the next hop for the distributed logical router, which also usually provides a line of delineation between the physical and virtual networks. So let's get in and see how to create this edge services gateway with Ansible. We have another very similar to the DLR. We have a 4-task playbook. Looks like I have a little typo here. Let's say task 4. You can see tasks 1 through 3 are identical to the DLR. I even copied and pasted the instructions from the DLR in here, so I'll fix that. But they are literally identical steps in these first 3 tasks. And then the 4th task is slightly different on ESG creation. Now let's go down and look at those. Again, each of these gather tasks is very straightforward. We gather the cluster and register it, gather the data store ID, and so now let's see the ESG creation task. While this format is quite similar to the DLR creation, if you notice the name of the NSX Ansible module it uses is different. So there is a specific piece of Python out there specific to this edge router creation. And but NetNet's a very similar module. We say the state is present, we give it a name, give it a description. One different variable here is the appliance size. This is not a parameter for distributed logical router. This is only in the Ansible playbook, right? This is only an available parameter on ESG. And we specify our MOIDs. And then we get to the interfaces. If you'll notice the format, if you scroll up and compare this to the DLR playbook, you'll see that the format for how we specify interfaces is slightly different. It is fairly similar. One difference here is I mentioned that this sorry, it says data center MOID. Where is it? The management port group MOID. We do use the management port group, or can use that as part of our HA settings, but in this case we're using it a little bit differently. If you notice for VNIC 0, we have to tell it which distributed port group or logical switch it's associated with. VNIC 0 is connected to a traditional distributed port group, and for that we're going to specify the port group's MOID, right? So I went into this gather MOID task here. I specified the name of the port group that I wanted my northbound interface to be on, my VNIC 0. That gathered the MOID, and then I used this variable here to specify the MOID to ensure that VNIC 0, the end result, is that it is going to end up on this distributed port group. Okay? And VNIC 1, that's a little simpler. It's connecting to a different type of distributed port group, this NSX logical switch, and we can just specify the name of that. So that's a little bit easier. Give it a default gateway, enable SSH access, give the admin, the username and password if we want to SSH or console in. This is important on ESG. ESG, if you don't specify that the firewall is false, it'll specify it'll be created with the firewall enabled, and which you may not want. Make sure that if you, especially in a lab environment, you generally want to be permitting traffic, or at least permit traffic until you once you deploy it, you can go in and configure it the way you want, and then specify things at that point. But just keep in mind, if you do, this is an optional parameter. If you do leave this out, or if you were to go through the GUI and deploy an ESG, the same thing. If you forget to check to turn the firewall false, and then afterwards you go try to test some pings and they don't work, well, keep in mind the ESG isn't just a router; it's also a firewall. And so if you leave the firewall service enabled, it'll start with the same default rule set that most firewalls do. And we've not enabling HA. So I'll go ahead and copy our playbook, and we're going to say vi create esg.yaml, type I for insert. I'm going to right click to paste the contents. Looks like I got a nice clean paste. I'll press escape to leave insert mode, colon, and give WQ to save and quit. And let's go ahead and run our Ansible playbook. So Ansible playbook command, if I can type. And was create esg.yaml. Run through these first 3 tasks very quickly, and this 4th task has to result in the creation of a virtual machine for the Edge Services Gateway and powering that on. So this will take a minute. I'm going to pause and we'll resume shortly. Okay, we're back, and we can see that my create ESG task is completed successfully. Look over in my course documentation in the Ansible here, on GitHub, and we can see that our results, we ran the play as documented, and our results are the same, right? Meaning that we ran 4 tasks, 4 of them were okay, 1 of them resulted in a change, and nothing was unreachable or failed. So we should be good for validate that our ESG has been created. And let's scroll down here and see how we're going to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and check in our NSX Edges section in the vSphere web client to make sure that we see that ESG is populated. And then we'll go ahead and log into the ESG, and we can ping the DLR from it. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to open my remote desktop session and go back to start from my home page. Go in the Networking and Security tab. Go to NSX Edges. And we can see that our Ansible ESG has been created. If we'd like, you can double click on that and go through the configuration. But for now, I'm going to go back to, actually I'm going to go up here to my short little navigator, and we'll go to our hosts and clusters view. We'll look at my Ansible DLR, right click on it, and choose to open console. And our login is admin username, and the password we created was the VMware1 password. Same password we've been using but doubled. The reason why we use that longer password is that there's a default requirement on the ESGs and DLRs for like 12 character length and some special characters in there. So make sure you comply with those defaults if you deploy ESGs or DLRs in production environments. And we'll go ahead and let's see, just show IP route just for fun. And we'll go ahead and we'll ping the DLR. It's at 192.168.101.2. And we can see that we are able to ping the DLR. And that's the end of our validation steps for this video. Thanks for joining.